Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my April wrap-up. So for the past couple months I've been doing wrap-ups with a kind of different style. I've been journaling while I talk about my wrap-ups and I've really enjoyed that. I might go back to it at some point, but the past month I haven't really been journaling. I just haven't been feeling it just because I've been so busy, so that's why we're back to regular wrap-up this month. As you can see, this is a different location. I came home because I ended my semester, my final semester of grad school, and so I decided to come home for a couple months while I look for jobs. Obviously everything is remote right now, so I don't need to be in my apartment, but I might go back and forth. We'll see with the job hunt and everything. But right now I'm at a friendly visit with my parents, which is very nice, and I missed all my bookshelves, so my mom decorated my room for me, so that's fun too. That's why the long preface about where I am, why I'm here, because I don't have the books with me. But anyway, let's get into what I read this month. So this was the month, my final month of grad school, and it was also the month that my thesis was due, so I didn't think I would get a lot of reading done, but I ended up being pretty organized with my thesis, so I had not extra time, but I had enough time that I could relax and have downtime between writing. So I actually did get some reading outside of my school reading done, which is always exciting. But first, let's go over the books that I read for class. So the first book I read for school was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and El Motar. I'm forgetting her first name. This was my favorite book of last year, and so it was really fun to read it for class and to like do a presentation on it. I really enjoyed myself. If you don't know, This Is How You Lose the Time War is an adult fantasy slash sort of epistolary novel with a sci-fi setting, and it's basically about a time war between these two individuals, these two like groups, and these two individuals that are on opposite sides of the time war fall in love with each other, and it's just a great sapphic sci-fi poetic epistolary novel, and I love it so much. It's so good. Again, it was my favorite book of last year. It was so fun to get to reread it, so fun to present on it. And then the final book that I read for class this year, for school ever, is Trust Exercise by Susan Choi. This is an adult fiction meta textual book. Is that the best way to describe it? I don't know. But basically, this book is following these teenagers as they go to high school at like a prestigious theater school, high school, performing arts high school, and kind of like the stuff that goes on there. This is a meta book because there's like a meta twist in the middle where I don't want to give too much away because it is like a plot twist kind of point, but I think the biggest thing to go into this book is to be aware that a lot of the discussions are about sexual assault. So if you're triggered by that, definitely look for a more detailed list of triggers. This book was really interesting. I wouldn't say it's the most enjoyable book to read, but I was really intrigued by what this story was trying to do. In some ways I think it was successful, in some ways I don't know if it was as successful, but it was a really interesting read, and it is very well written. So I gave it like a 3.5 stars. I didn't love the reading process, but I did think it was a really compelling book. And now let's get into the books that I read for myself this month. So the first one I read was Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is a young adult, new adult fantasy book. It has been popular since it was released in like 2015. It's remained a popular YA new adult fantasy novel. This is a fantasy book that's kind of after my own personal heart, after my own personal tastes, because it is very like character focused. It's basically about one girl kind of coming into her powers, coming into her own, and it's just her story of like exploring this fantastical landscape. If you don't know, Uprooted is basically about a girl who's in a fantasy world where there is this man called the Dragon who is like this famous wizard that like kind of reigns over their valley, and every 10 years he chooses a girl to be like his servant. People don't really know what happens to her. They don't really know much about the dragon besides that he kind of protects them. So it's like this kind of big mystery, because after the 10 years when the girl comes back, she doesn't want to return to the valley, to her home. And of course, our main character is going to be chosen to be that person. Shocker. Yeah, like I said, this book is kind of after my own personal taste in fantasy. It's very slow, very character driven. There's a lot of atmosphere and fantasy elements, but it's really about this like young girl kind of discovering herself. I gave this book 4 stars because I didn't love it as much as I was hoping to, but I did really like this book. Again, just did a lot of things that I personally really love in fantasy. I would say people that like the Gracing series, this is perfect. This book doesn't feel old or old-fashioned, but it does definitely call back to a younger YA kind of before Twilight, if that makes sense. It definitely reminds me of when YA was still trying to find its place and its voice. Also, I would say for people that like Howl's Moving Castle, that want something that's again a little bit more adult than Howl's Moving Castle, this would be a good pick for you. I think what I didn't love about this book was as the romance. I had heard that the romance is a very small part of the book, and I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think it is a pretty substantial part of the book, but I didn't fall like head over heels for the romance, if that makes sense. The romance is obviously between like the young girl and like this curmudgeon-y wizard man. I think that's kind of pretty obvious from the premise, but I just wanted to see a little bit more of them like coming together, if that makes sense, before like them coming together. But overall, it's a really strong book, and I can see why people have held it in such high regard for such a long time. Really enjoyed it. Just really, really good, especially if you're looking for character-driven fantasy. The next book I read was Obelisk Gate, and this is the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This book is the second book in the Broken Earth trilogy, which is an adult fantasy series or trilogy. I gave the Obelisk Gate 4.5 stars. I loved it, but just not quite as much as the first book. The series on a whole is very like big concept, like there's this really complicated magic system and a lot of stuff going on, a lot of reveals of information, and I think just in the second book a lot of the stuff was a little bit maybe too high concept for me. But overall, I really love these characters. I love this world. I love everything that happened. I love like the craft elements with the POVs and just everything about it. I'm so excited to read the third and final book. Like honestly, there isn't much to like kind of hold against this book series. I think it's just really elegant in everything that it does. There's a reason why every single book in this series won the Hugo Award. It's because it's amazing. And I'm just really excited to get to that third book, because it seems like people that like the second book don't like the third book as much. They still like it, but they don't like it as much. And it seems like people that don't like the second book as much tend to like the third book. So what I'm hoping is first book will remain a 5-star, 4.5 stars, and then back to a 5 stars, but we'll see. I don't think this series is going to disappoint me, because so far, again, it's been amazing. I'm just being very picky about certain things. And then the final book I read was, or reread, was Fire by Kristen Cashore. The night I was like packing and cleaning and getting ready to go on the airplane, I just went through my local library and looked for something to read. They didn't have anything on my TBR shelf, so I decided to pick up Fire by Kristen Cashore just for that day and then on the plane. I've read all 3 books in the Graceling series, and I'm planning on reading the 4th one, which is why I've been kind of slowly rereading this series. I reread Graceling last year and just had a really good time with it, and was really pleasantly surprised about how well it had held up, and I was similarly just as pleased with reading this. Again, this is a very character-driven fantasy. It's about one young girl coming into her power and discovering her place in the world. Graceling, Fire, and Bitter Blue are all companion books, and I think the 4th book is a companion book as well. So each book follows like a different character in the same setting, kind of over different time periods, and they're kind of loosely connected, but you don't need to read one to read the other, which I think is really neat. At least for the first 2 books, you don't have to read the first 2 books in order. The 3rd book, however, you do kind of have to read after the first 2, because it won't really make sense. But for this series, there is a world where people that are born with 2 different eye colors have special abilities, whether that be the ability to swim really fast or the ability to kill people really well, just some kind of extraordinary skill. And in this book, Fire, it's taking place in a kingdom that's kind of separated from the 7 kingdoms of the first book, and in their world they don't have the Graceling kids as much, but they have these monsters that kind of have extraordinary abilities to possess people and get them to like basically come willing so they can eat them. And in this world, Fire, our main character, is one of the only human, or one of the last human monsters, where she has the ability to compel people to her will, basically. So it's really, really a fascinating book. So I like Graceling a little bit more because I connect better with Katza than I do with Fire and Fire. But overall, this series is really extraordinary, especially for it coming out in like 2006, 2008. Like I think it really does stand the test of time, again, because it is so character focused. Not everything in this series is perfect, but I do think the series overall is just like really, really fascinating and really good. The characters are complex. They don't always make the right decisions. But yeah, my reread of Fire was great for the plane. Had a lot of fun with that and really, really enjoyed it. And then my final read for this month, which I haven't finished, is Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. I've read a little bit more than half of this book so far. It's a book of short stories that are all science fiction based, and I'm doing a vlog for this because I'm reading both the Ted Chiang's books, so look forward to that in the future. But yeah, I will talk about this next month and in the vlog once I finish it. But yeah, those are all the books that I read this month. I think I did a pretty good job for, like, again, not having tons of time. Now that I'm graduated, I will have a lot more time to read, obviously looking for a job, doing other fun stuff like that, but I'm excited to get back to reading. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.